All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our eLotus webinar today. My name is Donna, and I will be your host and your moderator. For over 2 decades, eLotus has been your trusted source for TCM continuing education for acupuncturists. We offer the largest selection of CEU courses with over 3,000 CE hours. And if you're new to eLotus, remember to sign up today for an eLotus account and receive a free 1 CEU course as a welcome gift. And this offer is valid for new accounts only. Let's do a few housekeeping before we get started with the webinar. If you're a big fan of learning new acupuncture points, visit eLotus Core, our ultimate free resource guide of Master Dong's acupuncture. Here you'll be able to see needling demos, learn indications, locations, and more. Plus, you can also view traditional points on our eLotus Core website, just like the Master Dong's acupuncture points. You can learn indications and locations of traditional points. Okay, so that takes care of everything. So here's a quick introduction of Michael Brown. Michael is a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, practicing alongside his wife at their private practice in San Jose, California. He has been practicing since 2013, cultivating a deeper sense of medicine that works and learning to bridge the worlds of biomedicine and classical acupuncture. Michael achieved his transitional doctorate in 2019 and is excited about the advancement of acupuncture research, neuroscience, metabolomics in herbal medicine, and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. He loves to teach and share information he has learned in hopes of helping others better understand ourselves and advancing the quality of medicine. And just a fun fact for you guys, Michael and I went to UCLA together. I always say this because it blows my mind. And he was my RA. And do you want to guess what building we were living in? It was called Evergreen. How weird, right? And here we are today. So it's just so amazing how the world, the synchronicity is like that, right? Okay, so go ahead, Michael. We tested your mic. You can go ahead and take over your screen from here. Thank you.
Thank you to Donna. Thank you to eLotus for inviting me today to share. This is basically just my research that I'm sharing with all of you. And hopefully some of this is interesting and useful to all of you and adds to the discussion of our medicine. So let's get started. Let's see if this will work for me. There we go. So I just want to start by sharing some of the main kind of core goals that I have in putting this together for myself and for all of you as some sort of universal standards of language around medicine, of course, Chinese medicine, and us in a world of Chinese medical practitioners in a world of biomedicine, and many of us in conventional medical settings as well. So Confucius spoke of this very succinctly, said, if names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. So if we're all not using the same words, then we're not likely to succeed. And of course, that can be applied to all kinds of things in society. And he summarizes, therefore, a superior person considers it necessary that the names they use may be spoken appropriately, and also that what they speak may be carried out appropriately. What the superior person requires is just that in their words there may be nothing incorrect. So in the spirit of speaking correctly about what it is we're doing, I just want to share sort of the history of and the current understandings of Chinese acupuncture channel theory. And the goals ultimately are to improve the quality of research that's done in acupuncture, of course, to improve the quality of all of our clinical outcomes, and of course, finally, to improve the quality of education as our tradition goes forth and as more people learn about and study acupuncture in different medical and educational settings. And of course, we're bridging the past with the present. We all live in the sea of time. And of course, it's important to understand the classics from our current biomedical standpoint and appreciate their wisdom and not throw them out, but actually to better appreciate the wisdom that we carry on through our traditions. So where are we in that understanding, in that matrix of understanding we're all using the language and understanding of our time as a context to describe pathological and clinical experience. So ultimate goal is really obviously to better understand and treat the body, to minimize suffering, disease burden on our lives, on society, and to reduce premature death. Those general goals of medicine. So why do we even focus and study and renew our understandings? I think it's for these main reasons, at least for me anyway. And successful new language and understanding, I don't think negates or defeats the past. It doesn't defeat past understandings. It just, hopefully the goal, I think, is to integrate and successfully integrate the past and the present into a coherent working body of information. And so if we speak in the language of the institutions of medicine that we all live and work in, I think we're more likely to be welcomed into more of them. And so that's part of my personal reasons and motivations behind integrating more biomedical language into my understanding of Chinese acupuncture and channel theory. And I think it can also help us provide more integrative and effective solutions that are inspired by the wisdom of classical medical perspectives. So to review the classical views of anatomy and physiology, it's of interest to me to look back and see how far back we can look and see in texts and archaeological information. How long has there been the idea of channels, vessels, and where do these ideas come from? When do they kind of solidify or formalize? And how does that lead into where we're at today? So that's what we'll be doing here. So the earliest understanding of health, as summarized by Harper in his 1998 text, Early Chinese Medical Literature, the Mangwang Dui Medical Manuscripts, it was essentially summarized that health was the free and proper movement of qi and blood through the body's channels. So it was already early understood that in order to be healthy or to prevent disease, you had to have the free and proper movement of these two things, substances or things in the body, qi and blood. And so the contemporary view that I kind of put together in my mind, just to kind of summarize where we're at now. Meridians or channels are multidimensional, multi-tissue responsiveness of the body. And we'll kind of break that apart, but basically channels are the interwoven, interrelating layers of the body and the systems in the body. Humans are always trying to make sense of the world in which we find ourselves in, including ourselves. Our bodies are quite mysterious and strange and messy, just like the world, of course. And we've long observed the macrocosm connected to the microcosm, the world within our bodies and the bodies within the world. And I believe that channel theory and the development of channel theory and general empirical medical concepts like this are elegant attempts to map useful pathways across the world. In the case of this metaphor of roads and maps along landscapes. And then, of course, maps of channels and pathways of useful, functional, medically valuable information in terms of the body. So just keeping that in mind. Classical view of anatomy and physiology, Harper again finding that in the 3rd century BC, there were already ideas of my vessels filled with blood and qi inside the body. These things dominated physiological speculation back then. And one definition of health, as I mentioned, was making sure that there was a free flow of qi and blood in the vessels. And so this was already an early concept that qi and blood movement was important for health, and that those things moved inside of some kind of observable pathways. So some of the earliest explicit statements in received literature about qi flowing along with blood through vessels inside the body occurs in a text called the Guanzi. And this is from 3rd century BC or BCE. And it stated, water is the blood and vapor of the earth, like what flows through the muscles and the vessels. So it's already a physiological, anatomical understanding of movements of substances through known and observable pathways in the body. So the idea that qi and blood together are the essential components of human life is only reliably documented in 4th century BC sources, by which time qi already referred to the omnipresent basic stuff of the phenomenal world. So obviously qi has many meanings, but as generally at that time was also understood as kind of the non-visible stuff that could be observed indirectly. So we know that acupuncture and Chinese medicine come together through the unifying of various philosophies. Yin-yang philosophy or 5-phase philosophies started to come together around the 3rd and 2nd centuries, we know. From the Spring and Autumn Annals, we have already identification of anatomy and physiology. Quote, human beings have 360 joints, 9 body openings, and 5 yin and 6 yang systems of function. In the flesh, tightness is desirable. In the blood vessels, free flow is desirable. In the sinews and bones, solidity is desirable. In the operations of the heart, mind, and will, harmony is desirable. In the essential qi, regular motion is desirable. When this is realized, illness has nowhere to abide, and there is nothing from which pathology can develop. When illness lasts and pathology develops, it is because the essential qi has become static. So you already see an early understanding of disease and physiology, pathophysiology, in the terms of understanding that if things aren't moving correctly, flowing in the vessels or in the regular motion of things, then disease forms. We also see in some Ma Wang Dui texts from around that time, a lot of medical advice, some of which shows the unification of these correspondence systems, so the yin-yang theory and 5-phase theory, with anatomy and physiology. And from that, we see that the medicine of systematic correspondence, as stated by Unscholt here, can be traced from a collection of individual writings of this period, the Ma Wang Dui texts, or the Maishu texts, which recommend healthcare and therapy based on demonology or spirit medicine, concepts of magic and systematic correspondence, like 5 phases or yin and yang, as well as surgical and pharmaceutical knowledge that may have been derived in part from experience and observation. So we know that people were practicing and studying and formalizing medicine at that time. And the Maishu texts have mention of the character, the character for Mai appears in those texts. For whatever reason, some of the academics don't believe there's a direct connection to these later concepts, but you see in the Maishu texts at that time, there were titles of these Mai, such as Taiyang Mai and Xiaoyang Mai, which should be familiar to all of us. There's already identification of channels and correspondences with certain elements or other factors or organs and systems. So there was a mapping of these pathways with other functions or organ systems in the body. And we have classical vessel channel theory starts to really come together. At that time, through this vessel theory. Basically, vessel theory provided a basic structure for the application of these philosophical concepts of yin-yang and 5-agent theories to the human organism. It allowed physicians to precisely classify the human microcosm and link its operation to phenomenal processes in the macrocosm. So essentially, trying to unify the world in a functional, medical, clinical way, the channel theory kind of solves that problem, or helps explain the world and our place and our bodies in it. The Nanjing and the Huangdi Jing are when things really kind of formalize, we know, and become more established and more mapped out as well. Unschuld notes that the author of the Nanjing, in particular, its historical context is important because first, its author contributed to the formative period of the medicine of systematic correspondence by creating a conceptual system of medical theory and practice that for the first time consistently accounted for the discovery of a circulatory movement in the organism. And second, the Nanjing marks the end of this formative epoch because it discarded all the irrelevant ballasts of the past and concentrated in a most coherent manner on nothing but the most advanced concepts of systematic correspondence. So essentially focusing on acupuncture and Chinese medicine as we really know it, and breaking away from some of the more spiritual traditions or the shamanic traditions. In devising his conceptual system, the author of the Nanjing adopted, with no change, a number of concepts from the Huangdi Neijing texts. In addition, he borrowed some older terms, but adapted them to his own ideas by presenting them with a modified meaning. Finally, he introduced a series of innovative terms and concepts to complete the doctrine he intended to teach. And I highlight this sentence from Unschuld here because this is essentially what I feel like we're doing now with the integration of contemporary neurophysiological research, trying to take older terms and adapt them to our ideas now and presenting them with a new understanding and new meaning. The core idea around the Nanjing appears to be centered on a modification of diagnosis and therapy in accordance with the discovery of a circulatory movement of qi and blood in the organism. And we still can use these concepts, but we have different understandings of them now with the context of neurophysiology, biomedicine, and all of these added layers of information. And from these concepts, the formation of channel theory comes, of course, the application of that theory and that these ideas is acupuncture. What is the most elegant way to address the body through this concept of channels and movement of qi and blood? And of course, we all know acupuncture has been that for many centuries. Just highlighting these needles, these are some of the first, not the first, but some of the oldest found needles. They're gold needles from a tomb that dated around the Han Dynasty. But of course, there were other devices that were likely used that didn't survive. Bone needles, stone needles, potentially bamboo slivers and things. So we know stimulation of acupoints goes back long before this as well. But this is kind of the formalization of Chinese channel theory, acupuncture channel theory, and acupuncture. So from an understanding of the importance of keeping qi and blood moving, we have the development of an ideal treatment method and the tools to achieve, which would be acupuncture. So in the culmination of a unified medical system in the Huangdi Neijing, we have the classic view of acupuncture and neuroanatomy. Now this translation comes from a paper that was published by Dr. Pony Chang. Some of you may have heard of him. He published a paper in 2015 called "What is the Point of Acupuncture in Medical Acupuncture," the journal. And he has a translation of the Ling Shu here that I think is helpful in that it identifies a certain neurophysiological aspect of acupuncture that was understood back during the time of the Huangdi Neijing. So he translates the Ling Shu section 1 here. The Yellow Emperor inquired to Chibo, "I do not wish to be permitted the use of toxic herbs and stone probes. I wish to use the minute needles to open up meridian vessels, regulate their blood and qi, and honor the confluence of their flow and counterflow, exit and entrance." Section 2, the essentials of acupuncture are easy to explain but difficult to enter. Mediocre doctors observe the physical form. Top doctors observe the spirit. The spirit is the guest at the door. Without observing the disease, how can one know its etiology? The subtlety of needling is its speed. The mediocre doctor observes the closing. The skilled doctor observes the issuing. The action of the issuance does not stray from its hole. The issuance within the hole is clear, quiet, yet concealed. Its coming cannot be met. Its going cannot be pursued. And we highlight this section because it hints at neurophysiological responses of acupuncture. We highlight this sentence again. This issuance from the hole, the acupuncture point, is clear, quiet, yet concealed. It's not something that you feel until it's actually stimulated, or the chi is achieved or arrived at that point. Its coming cannot be met. Its going cannot be pursued. It's a quick, rapid response that seems to come and go quickly. And so Pony Chang's idea here is that this issuance is what we now understand to be the depolarization of a nerve with the correct stimulation of acupuncture or de qi. So in Ling Shu section 4, Chibo says, when qi is reached, then the needling is effective. The effect is said to be like wind that blows away the clouds, illuminating to reveal the azure sky. This is the way of acupuncture. So again, highlighting here, when qi is reached, when de qi occurs, you have a true effect. Even back then, they understood that a certain response was needed to get a medically observable, clinically valuable effect. So just highlighting that. So coming back to the concept of useful maps, we move on through the ages here. We have a Ming Dynasty chart of the pericardium channel, and we just see how that later will map quite elegantly to the median nerve branch of the brachial plexus of the arm. And you see the formalization of these concepts through the centuries. Commentary from the 8th century on the Neijing. As Wang Ping here says, the tracts and channels, or the jingmai, are inside the body, and the branches, the ji, which connect them horizontally, are the luo, and the luo again have further branches which are called sun. The Zhenjiu Da Cheng also says that apart from the 12 regular tracts and the 15 acujunctions, or the luo mai, there are also horizontal branches and dendritic branches, the arrangement of which no one really knows, though there must be at least 300 of these jingmai scattered through the body. So even acknowledging then that there are main branches and then smaller branches and even smaller branches. And you see this mapped out, obviously, through the neurovascular pathways of the body. So finalizing the classical view of acupuncture, anatomy and physiology here, we have Liu, Needham, and Lowe commenting on the history and rationale of acupuncture in Moxa. Thus, there was a certain terminology overlap. And one can only say that on whole and broadly speaking, the Jing and the Luo were channels for Yang and Qi, while the Mai were channels for blood and Yin. Undoubtedly the typical abbreviation of Jing Luo, but it was based on a much wider body of theory which involved channels other than tracks. It also involved sigmological diagnosis, and the study of the interrelations between the internal organs in accordance with the principles of patafact and subdite phenomenon. But I highlight here just this concept that there was some distinction between qi and blood and the pathways that they move along. So going back to some of the major textbooks that we all start learning, many of us start learning acupuncture channel theory in Shanghai text from O'Connor and Bensky from 1981. They say the study of the channels provides an essential basis for understanding the reciprocal relationships and influences among the various physiological, pathological, diagnostic, and therapeutic aspects of traditional Chinese medicine. According to traditional theory, there exists in the body a system of channels or vessels which integrate all the body's separate parts and functions into a unified organism. Among the channels are major trunks and lesser branches which join internally with the vital organs and externally with the limbs, sensory organs, and orifices. The qi and blood circulate through the body via this network of channels. Thus, the intimate relationship between the internal viscera and the periphery of the body is primarily maintained by means of the channels. Channel theory reflects the holistic attitude of Chinese medicine, with great emphasis placed upon the interrelationships among all parts of the organism. And I highlight and find this beautiful coming back to it years later, and that every word of this still rings perfectly true, despite all the biomedicine that's filled my brain since then. These concepts do highlight the beautiful holism of Chinese medicine that I think is so essential and important in any practice of medicine, or any effective and successful practice of medicine. So in CAM, Chinese Acupuncture and Moxibustion from 1999, the meridians, which constitute the main trunks, run longitudinally and interiorly within the body, while the collaterals, which represent branches of the meridians, run transversely and superficially from the meridians. They are collectively termed Jingluo, the meridians and collaterals, in traditional Chinese medicine. This system of meridians and collaterals includes the 12 main meridians, 8 extra meridians, 15 collaterals, 12 divergent meridians, 12 muscle regions, and 12 cutaneous regions. So again, just mapping out the various layers of this system, this body that we have in organized ways. The theory of meridians and collaterals was systematized by the ancient Chinese people in their prolonged clinical practice. Its formation is generally considered to be in relation to the observation of the symptoms and signs of diseases and the transmission of needling sensation. Again, arguing, in my mind, to the point that just through clinical, empirical observation, you see signs and symptoms appear along certain channels or in relationship to the stimulation of certain channels and changes in the body, as well as that transmission of needle sensation, the issuance from the whole, as we translated earlier. So now we move on to more neuroanatomical relevance of acupuncture points and into more contemporary times. Pony highlights here a study that occurred around the time of the formation of what we all know as TCM, and kind of updating or bringing into the modern times classical Chinese medicine, and integrating that with the introduction of biomedicine into China at that time. So in 1959, there was a study at Shanghai First Medical College, now Shanghai Medical College of Fudan. And they did a study that found that almost all of acupoints are associated with peripheral nerves. Furthermore, 93.83%, or 304 of the 324 points, are associated with superficial cutaneous nerves, and 52% are associated with deep nerve trunks. Subsequent dissection studies conducted among 309 points of the 12 meridians, needles touch the trunks of the nerves directly at 152 acupoints, or almost 50% of them are on direct direct trunks of the nerves. And in the remaining 157 points, the nerve trunks were within half a centimeter of the acupoints. So that's interesting, and adds to kind of an initial basis for biomedical view of acupuncture and channel theory. And this somewhat culminates in this, and coming back to this idea of the issuance being specific to, or certain Diqi sensations being specific to depolarization of a nerve and the signals that it sends. So we have contemporary biomedical view of the Huangdi Neijing and a classical view of acupuncture and neuroanatomy, that when qi is reached, the needling is effective. And we'll see how this plays out in contemporary imaging, functional imaging, and other studies. So we have the biochemical mechanisms of acupuncture. Joseph Wong was kind of the indirect teacher of Dr. Pony Chang. He was a physiotherapist, MD, in Toronto, I believe. He published a book in 1999 called A Manual of Neuroanatomical Acupuncture. And he said that Acupuncture involves physical stimulus. The physical stimulus produced by the acupuncture needle as it is inserted into the physical body generates an impulse that travels either with or without the means of an electrical current to the nervous system of the human body. Peripheral nerves are depolarized, and there are responses from different levels of the nervous centers. So he's essentially trying to unify biomedical understandings that he has as a medical doctor with his Chinese medical training as well. And again, states, based on the information that they had available at that time, there have been a large number of modern scientific studies on the nature of acupuncture analgesia. According to Professor Bruce Pomeranz, a world-renowned acupuncture researcher at the University of Toronto in Canada, acupuncture needles stimulate type 2 and type 3 muscle afferent nerves, or A-delta, fibers, sending impulses to the anterolateral tract of the spinal cord. The impulses advance further to either one or all three centers, the spinal cord, the midbrain, and the pituitary hypothalamic complex. So even at that point, in the 90s, we had a good understanding based on research of the biochemical or neurophysiological pathways of acupuncture and its movement through the different portions of the nervous system. In 2008, Zhao writes in their paper, Neural Mechanism Underlying Acupuncture Analgesia. This is in the journal Progress in Neurobiology. Given that the acupuncture needle is a physical sensory stimulus, the intensity, frequency, duration, and interval between stimuli directly influence the kind of receptors activated. Increasing evidence has revealed that the types of afferent nerve fibers activated by acupuncture are diverse, depending upon the different manipulation methods of acupuncture and individual differences in acupuncture sensitization. So this gives credence to some of the conversations, even in the Huangdi Neijing, about different types of needle technique and the importance of where one is applying an acupuncture needle and how they're applying it. And we see that there are different, we start to be able to understand on a neurophysiological level what those differences are. Zhao also states, when the needles are twisted up and down repetitively, the deep tissues, particularly muscle, are locally injured. Pro-inflammatory mediators such as histamine, bradykinin, PGE2, 5-HT, and ATP are released and excite nociceptors directly or indirectly. And they're quoting a study there. So just showing at that point in the mid-2000s, we get very clear understanding of the different and the complex nature of acupuncture stimuli along different aspects of the anatomy and the physiology. And we get maps like this that attempt to simplify in a diagram form the complex cascade of neurotransmitter activity along these neural pathways and how an acupuncture point hitting certain nerves causes certain pathways to light up and signal to certain areas of the brain. So the meridians, essentially, or the channels, are simplified representations of complex systems. And Langevin and Wayne in 2018, in their paper, What is the Point? The Problem with Acupuncture Research That No One Wants to Talk About, try to differentiate what is truly, what tissues or systems are really primary to acupuncture's effects in a clinical and on an experimental level. And they say, although meridians are usually represented as lines on the surface of the skin, it has been proposed that the surface lines are a simplification of a more complex three-dimensional network, including tendinomuscular or fascial structures. And they also say an acupuncture point could be located where it is in acupuncture textbooks because, one, it is located along an anatomical structure such as an intramuscular fascial plane that contains a sensory nerve, and two, it corresponds to a location within this structure that is particularly accessible and safe to needle. This postulation has not been confirmed, but could be tested by comparing the physiological, including adverse effects of needling at various locations along a fascial plane and or nerve, some corresponding to acupuncture points and some not. They go on, jumping back to a previous study that Langevin did in 2002, trying to assess the involvement of connective tissue in acupuncture effects. She was quite convinced at that time, not sure how she feels now, but based on that paper, she may still, it'd be interesting to see her thoughts now. But back then, in 2002, and in this paper, they write, overall, more than 80% of acupuncture points and 50% of meridian intersections of the arm appeared to coincide with intramuscular or intramuscular connective tissue planes. These findings suggest that the location of acupuncture points determined empirically by the ancient Chinese was based on palpation of discrete locations or holes where the needle can access greater amounts of connective tissue. Now, Pony Chang would argue that those holes are actually where you can access the neurovascular bundles that hide or that run deep to all these connective tissues and myofascial tissues. But it's interesting to see here that the attempts to try to differentiate that. So Langevin and Yandao in that paper find that this interstitial loose connective tissue, including subcutaneous tissue, constitute a continuous network enveloping all limb muscles, bones, and tendons, extending into connective tissue planes of pelvic and shoulder girdles, abdominal and chest walls, neck and head. This tissue network is also continuous with more specialized connective tissues, such as the periosteum, paramecium, perineum, pleura, peritoneum, and meninges, a form of signaling, mechanical, bioelectrical, and biochemical, transmitted through interstitial connective tissue, therefore may have potentially powerful integrative functions. Such integrative functions may be both spatial, in connecting different parts of the body, as well as across physiological systems. Connective tissue permeates all organs and surrounds all nerves, blood vessels, and lymphatics. In addition, because the structure and biochemical composition of interstitial connective tissue is responsive to mechanical stimuli, we propose that the connective tissue plays a role in the integration of several physiological functions, e.g. sensorineural, circulatory, immune, with ambient levels of mechanical stress, or acupuncture. So they make a good argument, and there's a lot of helpful understanding of how essential connective tissue is in acupuncture's effects. But other research suggests that it is not essential per se. Obviously, it's important, but the acupoints and meridians are located close to peripheral nerves. And this study, published in 2017, titled Acupoints and Their Relationship with Multireceptive Fields of Neurons, finds that by means of morphological studies, it has been shown that most acupuncture points are located on or adjacent to peripheral nerve trunks or branches, capillary vessels, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, nerve receptors, nerve endings, and mast cells. So there's multiple systems there, obviously, but the meridians correspond to trajectories of relevant deep peripheral nerves, including blood vessels. Early studies identified that myelinated and unmyelinated fibers are stimulated during acupuncture by recording the compound action potential. The acupuncture signal transmission to the central nervous system occurred through such afferent fibers. Even the sensation that occurs during positioning of an acupuncture needle during treatment, the chi sensation, is now generally accepted that it involves a multitude of fiber types, ranging from fast-conducting myelinated A beta fibers of high threshold to slow-conducting unmyelinated C fibers with relatively low thresholds. And they also state, by means of morphological studies, and just highlighting again what they stated there, it is quite an elegant alignment that the acupuncture channels, the primary channels in particular, map along the main branches of the peripheral nervous system. And it may not be a perfect map, but it's pretty darn close. And in terms of arguing, is acupuncture channel theory and are these classical acupuncture channels, as we all learn them and know them, is it close enough that it's clinically effective and useful in terms of simplifying what is obviously complex and has subtle variation between each person. But in a general sense, it seems that the acupuncture channels map quite elegantly the peripheral nerve pathways. So I'm just showing some of the arm channels here. You have the Sanjiao pericardium mapping along the median nerve and its branches, and the ulnar nerve mapped by the heart and small intestine channels of the hand. And Pony Chang in that paper also mapping some of the more subtle distinctions of channel theory and where the channels start and end, and how that can be explained by branching of some of the major nerves. And in this case, the branch of the lung channel and the large intestine channel and how they connect or break off can be explained by branches that you see in the diagram on the far right. And then, of course, the branching of the paraspinal nerves through the sympathetic nerve branches into the organs, and then across the tissues transversely through the ribs or the muscles and tissues of the abdomen, also provide a mapping of different acupuncture points or places that you can effectively stimulate those branches. Just going back to the Shanghai text and the path of qi, I think it's also interesting that they say, quote, as the qi circulates through the channels, it passes from the limbs to the head and trunk, and then back again. The course traveled by the qi in the head, chest, abdomen, and back is referred to as the path of qi and is the common causeway through which qi travels. This is interesting from a neurophysiological perspective, because this is the pathway of stimulation of activity. If you stimulate a peripheral nerve, it travels up through the trunk, or through the limbs, through the trunk, into the head and the brain, and then the brain sends signals back down the same pathway. So it's interesting that functionally it was observed in Chinese acupuncture and channel theory that they understood this basic concept in neurophysiology. So peripheral sensory nerve tissue, but not connective tissue, is involved in the action of acupuncture. This paper was published in 2019. And they set up a study using rats as the subjects and a robotic acupuncture system to remove human stimulation or human effects on the stimulation of the needle. And they tried to block, or they blocked nerves with a local anesthetic, and then they blocked the connective tissues with type 1 collagenase, with the idea that they try to isolate the different effects with acupuncture stimulation. So what they found was, however, disruption of connective tissue by injecting type 1 collagenase into acupoints did not affect the acupuncture effects. So their findings suggest that the nerve tissue, not connective tissue, is responsible for generating the effects of acupuncture. If we assume the main effect of acupuncture is to send signals up through into not just local tissue, but up through the nervous system and back down. And so the summary is essentially their quote here: acupuncture effects were prevented by blockade of the nerve, but not disruption of connective tissue. Just kind of arguing the point that, and to Longevin's point, or to Pony Chang's point, that it seems that the peripheral nerves, peripheral sensory nerves, are primary in delivering the effect of acupuncture throughout the rest of the body. And so what is qi after kind of going through all of this history and the research up until this point? Pre-biomedical, we can say it's concepts of empirically observed responses to stimuli that are obviously very accurate, and just looking back from our context now is just beautiful and wonderful that they were so careful in their observations that they could map it effectively 2,000 plus years ago. So the needles causing the arrival of spirit, or the issuing along the Jingmai. They observed needling of points like stomach 36, obviously with their names, classical names, or different points at different peripheral nerves affecting internal organs and changes in the internal organs. In post-biomedical language, qi would then, I would sometimes summarize it as functional or actionable responsive aspects of tissue and substance. For me, in a way, that's what qi is. It's from a biomedical standpoint, it's the depolarization of nerves along afferent pathways, along with other more subtle responses like anti-inflammatory responses that occur locally or distally through the peripheral nerves, up through the brain, and then down through the sympathetic nervous system or sympathetic branches into the organs, causing changes in the organs and their tissues themselves, and even the microbiome, which is observed in research. So translating classical language into biomedical terminology, we go back to the Ling Shu as Pony Cheng translated it. When qi is reached, then the needling is effective, just highlighting the importance of getting that response from the nerves. And if Pony here says that the author interprets reaching qi as a needle-induced depolarizing event caused by mechanical transduction. Depolarization can occur directly via contact between the needle and the nerve, or indirectly. Given that a metal needle harbors intrinsic ferromagnetic properties, its proximity to a nerve is capable of altering the electromagnetic milieu around a nerve to cause depolarization. Alternatively, needle manipulation, such as lift, thrust, and rotation, results in deformation of surrounding fascia continuous with the epineurium fascia, which is the connective tissue that covers the nerves, or the nerves, the large nerve bundles, and can trigger mechanical transduction. If the depolarizing nerve fascicle were to be a sensory afferent, a propagating paresthesia would be perceived. If the stimulated fascicle were a motor efferent, then muscle fasciculation would be observed. If the stimulated fascicle were a sympathetic nerve fiber, then pseudomotor, pilomotor, and or temperature changes on the skin could manifest. The above neurologically derived changes would all be interpreted as the de qi sensation, or arrival of qi. And so depending on the response as you're needling, you can start to understand which types of nerves are being stimulated and generating a response. And you can use that in clinic to try to target specific tissues or effects. So in this way of thinking, de qi is a depolarizing event, depolarizing the nerve. Moving on to some other research, trying to understand the neuroanatomical relevance of acupuncture points. This was published last year. It was a review of neuroimaging studies that tried to compare, that were comparing verum acupuncture to sham acupuncture studies, trying to determine the importance of acupuncture points versus random points on the body. It's still a question that's trying to be definitively answered. And Chiu et al. Found that they got positive results and favored the existence of acupoint specificity in 74 of 79 of these neuroimaging studies. And what's interesting in 4 of the studies that had negative results, all the subjects received only one session of acupuncture. And we know that usually to get clinical efficacy, we have to do multiple doses of treatment. So they argue that maybe some of those negative results were only because they only did one session of acupuncture. And they also found that there were 7 studies that focused on on the comparison of acupoints along the same meridians, and some of those studies found no significant differences among these acupoints and their effects on the central nervous system response, arguing that potentially it's more about hitting the nerves and creating a response along a specific peripheral nerve branch rather than specific points, a few sun or inches or one joint over the other. But you take that for what it's worth. So just to summarize before we go on to any other research and finish up, I see channels as multiple interrelating layers, as I shared with you earlier. Channels our multidimensional, multi-tissue responsiveness with the neurological system as primary, and the cardiovascular system as key to that as well in delivering things besides neurotransmitters throughout the body, things that affect the movement of blood and the immune response. And of course, connective tissue, as we heard from Longovin's description, is key to that response, but not necessarily essential. And all of these systems respond in ways that can be distinctly observed in isolation and also communicate with one another in different circuits of bidirectional communication and activity that is useful or clinically relevant. And acupuncture differentiates these systems. Our system of acupuncture channel theory attempts to differentiate these complex relationships among systems in the body to achieve our desired therapeutic response. So of course we have the neurological as primary here, the electrochemical signaling, which you could summarize as qi in general, maybe not specific types of qi, but just generally qi in the context of qi and blood, causing peripheral nervous system to central nervous system changes, cause sensory motor changes, central nervous system changes, perception of pain, changes in the sympathetic parasympathetic balance or yin and yang balance, changes in mental status and psychological responses, and changes in cognitive function. Also causing organ level changes through the central nervous system and immune system changes, causing changes in regulation of inflammation or other activities. And of course, we have the cardiovascular aspect of channels, which you could look at from the perspective of just fluid dynamics, of making sure there's proper movement of nutrients and waste in and out of tissues and distribution through the body. There's local effects from acupuncture and also non-local effects, changes in heart rate and the flow of blood through the vessels happens non-locally with acupuncture. And so multiple interrelating layers, simplified. Again, primary channels and their connecting channels are primarily, from what I see, the neurovascular bundles and their branches, with the major nerves as the primary conduits of this sensation and effect. And I think it's useful to from this Acupuncture and Medicine Journal publication from 2009, Chung states, it is useful to classify the neuroanatomical significance of the consensus points into 4 different types: the local effect, intramuscular stimulation; the local effect, nerve stimulation; systemic effect possibly associated with sympathetic ganglia; and systemic effect significance unclear at this time, according to this paper. But obviously we know there's been a couple papers published recently that show connections between acupuncture stimulation on the peripheral aspects of the body that cause changes in the gut and the microbiome and things like that. So the divergent channels and the 8 extraordinary channels, I think in some ways are attempts to explain the other complex connections and responsiveness of the central nervous system to the peripheral stimulation. And this study showing electroacupuncture stimulating natural killer cell proliferation and reduced tumor size. So just a study where they found that electroacupuncture in cancer patients showed changes in the immune system and the production of natural killer cells. So we know that acupuncture can cause system-wide changes, in this case, changes that are beneficial to somebody receiving chemotherapy and needing stimulation of white cell and immune response. This study, traditional Chinese acupuncture and placebo sham acupuncture, differentiated by their effects on mu opioid receptors, as interesting as published in 2009, trying to differentiate true acupuncture from sham acupuncture and its different effects. Acupuncture therapy, they say, quote, acupuncture therapy evoked short-term increases in mu opioid receptor binding potential in multiple pain and sensory processing regions, including the cingulate, dorsal, and subguinal, insula, caudate, thalamus, and amygdala, all parts of the brain. Acupuncture therapy also evoked long-term increases in mu opioid receptor binding potential in some of the same structures, including the cingulate, dorsal, and periinguinal, caudate, and amygdala. These short and long-term effects were absent in the sham group, where small reductions were observed, an effect more consistent with previous placebo PET studies. Long-term increases in the mu opioid receptor blood pressure following true acupuncture were also associated with greater reductions in clinical pain. So just showing that on a very deep level, or from a very neuroscience focused level, and the effects of acupuncture in the brain, there's a distinction between true acupuncture and sham acupuncture that's measurable. Phantom acupuncture induces placebo credibility and vicarious sensations. This was another interesting study published in 2018, where they isolated and created a very complex means of tricking people into thinking they were getting acupuncture. This paper, I encourage people to check it out. It gives an interesting study design for trying to isolate true acupuncture from sham acupuncture. And what they found was true acupuncture achieved, again, obviously, as you'd expect based on the last study and other research, different changes in parts of the brain that affect perception of pain and regulation of organ function and other key immune response and things like that. And the sham group activate more aspects of cognition and expectation. And while people in sham, while they weren't actually receiving any needling at all, still perceived sensations, and the brain can generate sensations when it expects them, even if it's not actually physically being stimulated. So it's a really beautiful, elegant example of how we know that true acupuncture can provide or provides distinct effects through these known channels, distinct from placebo or the expectation that occurs primarily in the prefrontal cortex. They note, quote, acupuncture somatosensory afferents can be delivered through an ascending pathway through the peripheral nervous system, which carries stimulus information from the spinal cord to the thalamus, PAG, and reticular formation, and after that to the anterior cingulate cortex, insula, and SIS2, where tactile information can have broader affective cognitive influence. Just pointing to the fact that acupuncture stimuli delivers information to specific areas of the brain that have more effect than just affecting those parts of our brain that can alter perception of pain, but not in any lasting way. And more into peripheral nerves causing organ level changes. From this study in 2015, we already have people beginning to break down Ordovas Montanis, Rakoff, Namholm et al. Here, looking at regulation of immunological processes by peripheral neurons in homeostasis and disease. You see the autonomic and somatosensory nervous systems effects on other parts of the body and how that might happen on a biochemical level, on a physiological level. In a similar study from a couple of years ago, looking at acupuncture points, we mentioned this earlier, and how true acupuncture points cause different receptivity and activity along the nervous system to affect greater effect. And in this study from 2018, active acupoints differ from inactive acupoints in modulating key plasmatic metabolites of hypertension, just showing that an active acupoint treatment group here can the follow-up plasma be clearly separated from the baseline plasma. There's distinct changes in the blood from true acupuncture to from sham acupuncture or just randomly selected points. And just again demonstrating the importance of and the value of the classical channels, and even in the context of our current biomedical understandings. And then there's other things that I'm not going to go deeply into because I don't fully understand them, and it starts to get beyond my understanding. But there's evidence that the acupuncture and the endocannabinoid system have overlaps, that in this case, quote, acupuncture administration and the endocannabinoid system activation produce several of the same biological effects, including the maintenance of energy balance and the regulation of immune, respiratory, and gastrointestinal functions, providing yet another layer of activity and connection between the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system, and then the rest of the body and the organs and systems. Jumping in around, there is some interesting surgical anatomical information that may explain some of the lual connecting channels. These concepts of the anastomoses, or the connections between the major branches of the primary peripheral nerves, or the primary channels. You see the Martin-Gruber anastomosis appears somewhat irregularly, maybe in 1 in 5 cadavers, but it does provide an interesting illustration of possible explanation for some of the lual points and where they're located. There tend to be these connections that appear between the channels, or sorry, the peripheral nerves, and also at the nerve endings, there's anastomoses as well. But here's that Martin-Gruber anastomosis that can appear at various points and has been observed along various points, just along the median nerve. I'm going to stop there. There's more in the notes, but I do want to leave time to kind of wrap up and answer any questions. I know people have to get going. So. If there were any questions, I'm happy to chat with folks for a little bit. I see Aline commenting on how qi isn't just necessarily a neurophysiological phenomenon. And yes, I think there's plenty of space for discovery, obviously, in medicine for these more subtle aspects of energy. Obviously, we're living examples of the subtlety of things around us. So I don't mean to discount any ideas of qi as more of an energy medicine. This is just from a more anatomical, physiological perspective. I'm not quite sure about scalp acupuncture connection to the brain, other than direct branching of the cranial nerves into the head and the scalp. So I think the explanation would just be that it's a stronger, closer connection to those cranial nerves. I think this is also explanation for why ear acupuncture can be so effective and useful clinically to affect the entire body, but primarily the central nervous system, just because it's hitting some of the branches of those cranial nerves that have deep impact on the central nervous system. Any other questions or thoughts? Thank you all for the time. I hope you take the notes with you and look into the research on your own. And I'm always open and interested in extending this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for a great class, a great webinar today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This class has been recorded, so it will be available on our TCM Wisdom Tube tomorrow afternoon. If you want to watch it again, or if you missed any part of it, you can do that too. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much. And we hope you have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Stay safe, and happy Valentine's Day, happy New Year's, and happy Chinese New Year in the days to come next week. Bye.